Welcome everybody to the Friar Talk YouTube and podcast channel. Today we're going to be talking about a couple guys that could potentially get up in 2021 that were just drafted. So these are guys that were drafted either Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday. I think all of them were drafted on Monday, actually. And we're just going to talk about, do these guys have a chance to make an immediate impact? Because it is pretty rare, but it has happened before. So Chase, do you want to get into the guys that we think could potentially, make some impact either in September or maybe even the playoffs this season?
Yeah, I got four guys in particular, and I think we kind of come to a consensus on these are the four guys. It's going to be either Robert Gasser, Kevin Kopps, Ryan Oak, and then either Garrett Hawkins. Just because they can all fit a reliever or be stretched out into a long reliever. They have the college experience where they have been playing, but right before the draft, so they're not coming into this cold, and you can probably give them a little extra seasoning in AA or wherever you decide to start them out, because some of the guys are a little bit developed based on the competition they've played. Like Kevin Kopps, he's 24 years old. You ideally don't want to start him off low in the minors. You probably want to start him at AA until he succeeds and go on from there. Even then, there are guys that have been called up straight to the league after getting drafted and have performed at a high level. And Kevin Kopps might be that type of player just because, from what I've read, he's a very intelligent player. He has an extremely good feel for pitching, and we saw it with his numbers. His stuff plays really well. Gasser would probably fit in the same role. We'd all kind of be looking at these guys as relievers. Hawkins has a 96 mile per hour fastball. Fastball usually plays pretty well in the majors if you can locate it with some decent secondary. And Oak was a reliever. He reached 96 and struck out 41% of his opponents. So really solid numbers for him. Kind of need another lefty in the bullpen. Palm going down. Maybe we get Strom back. We don't know what's really happening with those two guys. So I'm mainly looking at the lefties as an option because that is kind of our weak area outside of Tim Hill.
Yeah, like Matt said, it's really rare for anyone to come out and make an immediate impact right out of the draft. If I had to go with one guy, if I had to put my money on one guy, and I'm not saying like this is a for sure thing, it'd probably be Kevin Kopps. And that's not because he's he got first team All SEC, put some good stats his senior year. And I'm not saying like he's a crazy good player. I haven't seen much film on him. I'm not saying he's a bad player either. I haven't seen film on him. I haven't seen too much on him, but he's 24 years old. He just graduated. I don't know if he graduated, but he was a senior, finished up his senior year with some relatively good stats. Like I said, 24 years old, on the older side of things in this draft. So, when it comes to experience, maturity, all that kind of stuff, Kevin Kopps is probably the guy that comes to mind when I think who might have an immediate impact, who might get brought up first. That's the guy that comes to mind for me.
Isaac, I feel the same way as you. I think Kopps is the most likely guy to get brought up right away. He struck out over 13 guys per 9. That's impressive. You're going to need swing and miss stuff, especially if you're going to get called up immediately from college ball. Also posted an opposing batting average of 162, and then his ERA was 0.9. So he's coming off a dominant season. Yesterday, we kind of just went over the whole draft haul. Didn't talk about all the guys, but talked about the bigger name guys that we knew about it, had seen videos on Twitter and looked up their stats and did some research on them. And so Kevin Kopps could kind of end up playing that Cal Quantrill type role. So I brought it up in that last episode, and I think this is something where we've seen Craig Stammen in that role. He's pitched a lot of innings, and I say injuries as an accident because that's what I'm concerned about with this team. Same thing with Tim Hill. Chase, you brought up that you think that a lefty could potentially get brought up, and that's not Kopps, but I think there's a big chance of that because it's a good sign that Strom's coming back, but doesn't look like Pomeranz is. I don't know. I hope he comes back, but it's looking a little scary right now. And so you kind of start adding these guys, and Stammen and Tim Hill have pitched so many innings, and I say it again, they pitched so many innings. So it's concerning. It's really concerning when you look at these guys and you go, okay, there might need to be some more relief. I think Kopps could be a guy that comes in September and pitches a lot of like empty innings, which sucks to say, but that's what he's going to need because he could potentially be a guy that they plan to have in that bullpen, next year to start that year out. So I think he's the most likely option. Gasser is one of my favorite picks, probably my second favorite outside of James Wood. And I love that. I think that he's more likely to come up, late next year in 2023. And so I don't know if he's going to be the guy, but you also, though, Chase, we were talking about how rare it is for these guys to come up. But yesterday you brought up a guy that most Padre fans should know that was immediately brought up from the draft.
Yeah, well, there's going to be two guys that I mentioned. One was specifically a pitcher. But yeah, Dave Winfield, he got called up to the majors right away after he got drafted because he's a very unique case. He's one of those guys that got drafted by the three leagues. He got drafted in the NFL, he got drafted in the NBA, and in the same year he also got drafted by the MLB. And so he negotiated his way with the Padres like, hey, I got these two other teams that are waiting for me that I can probably start right away for. So I either get called up to the majors or I walk. And they did. He went straight to the major leagues out of the draft. There's another guy. He didn't get called up right away after getting drafted, but he did make the Royals postseason team. I'm talking about Brandon Finnegan. And he stepped up to make an immediate impact. He's one of two players to pitch in both the College World Series and the actual MLB World Series in the same year, which is crazy to think about. But if I had to bet money on one of the two guys making it onto the roster this year and making an immediate impact, it would probably be Ryan Oak and Kevin Kopps, just because both of them can fit that reliever type role. Oak is strictly a reliever, has a strong fastball, and he struck out a lot of people. So he can probably get away with some of the stuff that he did in college at the MLB level because his stuff seems to play at a high level. And then Kevin Kopps, he's been used in every single situation you can think of. He's closed games, he's relieved games, he's started, and everywhere in between. So between those two guys, that's who my money's on. And I really hope Kopps comes in and he shows that he can dominate in the league at whenever he does come up, hopefully this year, because then that would just be killer for the bullpen to have in the playoffs.
Yeah, it seems like it's a solid draft class. Drafted a lot of college players, probably because I think I mentioned in yesterday's video that we got Tatis locked up for a lot of years, still in his prime. Machado's still in his prime. Trent Grisham's going to be around for a while. Jake the Rake is everything we wanted him to be. That guy's an absolute beast. So we got a couple young guys on this roster that seem to be like they'll be around for a while, and we want to get guys that might be able to make an immediate impact to go along with these guys because take advantage of their years with us, try and win as many games as we can. And that's why, you want to get college players. They might be able to make an immediate impact, more likely to do so than a high school player, obviously. So overall, looks like a solid draft, especially, we need as many pitchers as we can get because it seems like we need starting pitching or pitching in general every single deadline. Not every single deadline, but let's be real, we've sucked for a lot of years, so we've needed everything for a while. But up until now we need pitching. Now we need relievers, and so good thing we drafted a lot of pitchers.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You look at this team. You saw, I think it was 3. So after the initial 2 picks, there were 3 pitchers drafted, and you just see a ton of college pitchers. And there was a stat, I want to say like the majority of the class was definitely pitchers, and there were 4 lefties. I think it was like 4 out of 11 pitchers drafted, or 4 out of 13 were lefties. So, you're seeing a pretty decent split. And it makes sense. This team has had so many injuries in the pitching department. So you have a lot of guys that are going to be able to make impacts a little bit sooner than later, which is always great when you're drafting guys like that, especially as like bullpen pieces where, okay, we can have some low cost bullpen options that are going to be able to produce. These guys are good. They're ready to go. Maybe they're not super high end or anything, but they're going to need guys to pitch a lot of innings, especially out of the pen. So I like how this class went. I do find it interesting, Chase, that you brought up that Oach could be that guy that comes up and, he pitches this year. I think that the biggest case for that argument is that we've seen so many injuries to the lefties in the Padres bullpen and in their rotation. So I think that there is a good chance that's the case. I brought up that I think that Gasser is going to be more like late next year, 2023. And if that's the case, then it makes sense if Oach has a better chance than him. So I do think that he's probably the second best guy, but I would still go with Cops as the most likely guy to make an impact this year. But anything else you guys want to add before we take on off out of here?
Yeah, at least we didn't go with the Angels strategy of the draft to draft a pitcher in a single round hopes that one of them hit. I like what the Padres did. They kind of split it up a little bit everywhere. I mean, it was majority pitchers, but it wasn't 20 straight pitchers, which, that's good.
Yeah, I think I'm good. I don't really have anything to say about the draft class. Just got to wait and see how they work out. Who knows how long it takes. Could be this year, could be next, but hopefully we see some impact here soon.
One thing I want to add, just because we're talking about these guys in the Padres, their prospects and in their farm system, I kind of brought up a potential trade where Justin Lange was involved. And Chase, you brought up his his minor league debut. And so all of those discussions might have to be on hold because you want to talk about how good he did in his debut.
Yeah. So, his main concern coming out of the draft is that he's a very high velocity arm. He added a ton of muscle, but his mechanics were kind of very shaky, I guess you can say. He didn't necessarily know where he was throwing the baseball at all times. He had sometimes a very strong lack of control. And then his kind of secondaries was kind of lacking behind his fastball because in high school you didn't need to use his secondary because he can throw a fastball 100 miles an hour. So, there's that. And so he just made his debut. He made 2 short starts, and those amounted up to 7 innings, 1 walk, and 10 strikeouts, which I think the strikeouts are amazing. That's a lot of strikeouts for a debut. But I think the most impressive thing is that he only walked 1 batter.
Okay. Yeah, pretty impressive numbers for Justin Lange in his first outing. Hopefully, that keeps going. Like I said, hopefully we see some of these guys up here soon. We brought him up in a trade, like Matt said. Obviously, opinions might be a little changed. Hopefully his value stays this high in case we want to trade him in the future. But I think the Padres are in a good spot right now. I think they're in a good spot in the future. And hopefully, we talk about the pitchers, and hopefully this pitching staff for the Padres does come around. Hopefully we start getting some guys back from injury. Drew Pomeranz, especially, we know how big of a role he has in the bullpen. So that way, these guys can develop in the minors.
Yeah, I feel like that's just another example of how Preller's able to find these guys with just great tools. And hopefully, there's a couple of guys in this class that are like that as well. But really cool to see that Lange is out there pitching great to start his minor league career. And hopefully soon MLB career as well, because having him as a potential arm to come up in the next couple of years would be really cool. Dude has crazy stuff. So that will be awesome to see. But I think that's going to do it for today's episode. So we will talk to you guys tomorrow.